Good evening, everyone. Michael Devine here for another episode of Gray Matters Radio. I'm your host, Michael Devine. I'm America's counselor. Normally we have the armchair, but the armchair quarterback, he was unavoidably detained, so not going to be here this week. Well, it's all right. I think we can do this show. I mean, I do therapy by myself. I mean, I think I could handle it a few weeks of doing it on my own. Don't you guys think? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm asking... Maybe I'm asking too much. I really don't know anymore. Fuck it. As a therapist, I think a lot of times I try to hide maybe how I feel about a lot of things. I know a lot of my clients listen to the show. I know people that are, maybe potential clients are listening. And so I think a lot of times I kind of, with my opinions or how I cover something, and maybe I'm not as honest enough of how I feel about things, because I don't want to give off like what I really think about it, because I think what gives me the ability to do my job is to be non-judgmental. But I would be lying if a lot of what's been going on in this country with the shutdown, the social distancing, all the debating, all the protests, literally in our own state here in Ohio, we have Dr. Amy Acton, the medical director, the head of the Ohio Department of Health, who's been doing an awesome job of trying to keep people safe. Literally has been able to come to the press conferences because armed people and armed protesters are showing up to her house. And it's just... Gosh, it's just, I feel like we've jumped the shark with this. And so I wanted to kind of put on my therapist hat on here for the show. I think a lot of times the media, I think the media does a a piss poor job of actually covering things in the way that they should. A lot of sensationalism, a lot of it is trying to stoke the anger, the emotion, and nowhere in there is there any understanding of anything. We know what their conclusions are, then they present the evidence that matches their conclusion or their headline, but nowhere in there are we really actually understanding why the things are happening. Why are we seeing the things that we are? And I think we need to do a better job of that. And I know I'm always priding myself on the show to change things up, do things in a different way, and I think I need to start doing that. I think as a show, where people are looking to us on some of these topics for information. And I think maybe we aren't doing, we aren't covering things the way that we should. So I want to try something like that this week. So what I wanted to do is almost make the show almost like a little bit of a therapy session. And so what I did, I went out, talked to three different folks from three different walks of life, and I wanted to get into, there's three basic questions I wanted to ask them. These are people that, a couple of them are fans of the show, a couple of people, or one of the people, or somebody that we know here in Columbus, and so I wanted to, almost like a therapy session, dive into what they believe, what their personal viewpoints are or opinions of social distancing, the economic shutdown. I wanted to know where they base their opinion or what they base it upon, what data, where do they read it, what has helped them form that opinion. And then number three, I wanted to also dive into a little bit of, okay, like what do they really think about all the politicization of it? Why do we feel like we are being politicized? So I think it was really kind of telling, and I think we need to do more of this, of asking questions we don't know the answer to, and then doing something different. We actually listen to what their answers are, and it's amazing what we can learn. So, so here are our three sound bites of the people, and I want you to really listen just to how they answer, and more listen to what they believe, why they believe it.
I think the social distancing guidelines that they've put into place are definitely a good thing. I choose to follow the guidelines and wear a mask in public to protect myself from infecting others who could potentially be immunocompromised. With the possibility of a quarter to half of the population walking around with COVID and without symptoms, and personally being a healthcare worker, I could at any time be walking around with it and not know it, but also spreading it to other people. It's mandatory I wear a mask all day at work and practice these guidelines to minimize the risk of spread to my coworkers. Why would I not continue to practice this in public? A minor inconvenience for me is nothing if it means that I am protecting one person from my germs. When it hits close to home, and you know somebody who's spent over 30 days in the ICU and on a vent, you do what you do to protect the most vulnerable, because it's what being a good human being is all about.
I believe that the social distancing, I understand all of it, and I think it was important in the beginning of the whole process when all of this took off and got bad. I follow the social distancing guidelines. I understand it. Like I said, I think it makes total sense. You separate people, and that's obviously going to slow the process into the hospitals, which from everything that I've heard, is the whole reason for it. Not to, prevent everyone from getting the disease, but slowing the hospital, from getting overrun. Now, that being said, I think at some point we have to look and see what is the stopping point. How long do we go? I mean, there's no answer for this, because this is not anything we've gone through. If you're talking about the masks as part of the social distancing, I remember in the beginning, the masks, that was everyone was saying, oh, you don't want to wear the mask. The masks are not for anyone that isn't sick. And then out of nowhere, it seems like the masks took off along with the social distancing. And that's really where I started to have an issue, was with the masks, because I didn't understand the purpose behind them when we were social distancing. And my belief is that I should have a choice if I want to wear that mask. And I understand the stores choosing to make their own decisions on whether they want to have customers come in the store to wear a mask. And as an American, I understand that every company should have that right. That's their choice. And then it's just as much my right to decide if I want to shop in that store or, go to that place. But I had an issue when if the government tries to tell me you have to do this, that's when I start to draw the line, because I think it's a real fine line where you start to lose liberties and you don't get those back. But I practice social distancing. I try to follow the rules the best I can. And the real question is, when does it end? How do we know when we're supposed to go back to normal? And I want to go back to normal the way it was.
From a frontline perspective, it works. I mean, we can talk about like how stringent things should be and how strict things should be, and have these different ideas about 6 feet enough. The little knobs can be tweaked here and there to get the exact specifics down, but it works. And I can speak from perspective of like working on like the epidemiology of COVID, like seeing the drastic the difference in how contact tracing and investigation was going early on versus when it was like where we are now, when social distancing has been put in place. It's been night and day. So when we first started having peaks where I work, a lot of people were like, yeah, I was with like these 9 or 10 people at this party. I was with another like 30 people here and there. And I probably exposed a bunch of them. So we're probably going to have to contact trace all of them. Like, these are people who had COVID. And then pretty much every single investigation that we've been doing after this circumstance has been like, oh no, I may have gone to the supermarket once and I might have been exposed to someone who was coughing or maybe something like that. But no, I'm just at home, and the only people are with me is like my girlfriend and my dog. So these personal stories that I'm hearing over and over and over again when I'm investigating these cases on the front line, you hear the difference. And what that translates to in real life, and what I have to deal with, is that instead of always having to think, oh my God, this one person could have exposed any of like 15, 20, 30 people, they're like, we just have to monitor their family, or they're just at home with their apartment and they're like getting groceries delivered. And so that cuts down the number of opportunities that the virus can spread from person to person. Just by limiting down these contacts that you have, we have seen how that has changed, and we're starting to see the effects in terms of the reduced number of people getting infected, the reduced rates, because like looking at all the data, it works. And it sucks from like an economic perspective, trying to force as many people to stay as we can to like stay home, stay away from work. I really understand that there's a huge burn on this, but just to keep this in mind, even with all these social distancing things being put in place, the death toll from this virus in the United States is greater, or is either greater right now, or is very quickly going to become greater than the average annual death toll from the flu.
So it's just simply based on what we currently know about the virus. I know it's not a lot. I think we're learning every day something new. But the data that's been presented to us has been presented by highly educated epidemiologists. And, the knowledge I have as a nurse about how the human body works and how it's affected by this disease is enough for me to follow the guidelines and to listen and to do what we're supposed to do to try to keep it at bay, as best we can.
I get all my information from Facebook. No, I'm kidding. That's not a great place to get all of your information. Facebook is a great place to see what a lot of people think about something. I get my information, a lot of sources. I watch the state of Ohio press conferences. I watch the federal press conferences, I guess you would call it, with the president and his team. I read news online and source my material and see if it's something you find in one place, will you find it in another place that, you also find reputable, because it's kind of crazy right now with the news. You don't know what to believe in some areas. I mean, I saw the picture online, and I don't know if it's true or not, where you had somebody with a news source post a picture of a California beach, and then they also had a picture of a Jacksonville beach, and they used it for the same city, and that obviously didn't make sense. But I try to source my news from different outlets, try not to be too biased, but you just got to be smart. We're people need to make their own decisions and do what's best. I like to tell everyone, you do you, I'll do me, and we're all going to be just fine.
Well, I don't think it should be at all a political or a partisan issue of any kind. I get that people are hurting right now, but I also understand why they put all the restrictions in place. I understand if we didn't do what we did by shutting everything down, the hospitals would be overwhelmed and patients would have to pay the consequences. I mean, look at what things were happening over in Europe. People were running out of ventilators. They were choosing who to save and who not to save based on the resources that they had. I get it. I get people are upset because of the economy and the effect that it's going to have, and that it's going to take a extremely long time probably to fix it all and to recover, and some businesses and people may not ever recover. And I get that people are desperate right now, and it's scary, and things are just very uncertain and unsettled. I mean, I feel it even at work. I feel unsettled. I don't like it. It does not make me feel good. Hospitals are hurting. They're laying people off. People are being furloughed, because of everything that was put into place. But, this has become a battle. It's, do we save the economy or do we make money? And, or do we save the economy and make money, versus do we save lives? And that's sad. Do we suffer financially and save people, or, it's greedy, and greed always wins. So honestly, it doesn't ever really matter what, the choice is. People are always going to choose greed and money over a human being, which is sad. I feel like the general disgusting, toxic culture that we have become is exactly what's happening.
As a healthcare worker, when you see people basically just shunning the science, shunning, the sacrifices that everyone has kind of made. I mean, like, how's that come across to you? Like, when you see,
it's
people.
Infuriating, because I feel like, how can you just completely discredit data and facts that we know right now? And I don't know. I just feel like, I think it's ignorant. I think it's selfish. And for some people to go out and just outright refuse to do anything to protect themselves from possibly infecting other people is incredibly selfish and stupid.
As far as politics goes, I'll give you my honest opinion. When it comes to the president's response, I think he's done an absolute fabulous job. I think for what he was dealt, the time frame that he dealt with it, the unheard of, disease we've dealt with in the beginning, how to manage it. I think he's done a great job. Sure, he makes gaffes. We all know how the president can maybe carry on or speak longer than he needs to. But I think when it comes to politics, the mainstream media, the left, there is nothing that he is going to do that will let them give him any credit for doing anything they think is good, or anyone on the right. That being said, if it was a Democrat in office, we would probably see the same thing. I'll be honest with you. But as far as politics goes, I think the other aspect of it comes down to with all the businesses being shut down. I think when people feel like their liberties are being taken away, there's socialists that are for that. And I think a lot of people who are conservative and believe that they want to keep we want to keep our fundamental rights. And we see that as a threat, that once you start losing those liberties, they're harder to get back when it comes to the socialism aspect of it, where the government is having more control than we want to see.
I mean, I don't want to get into like who said what and whose side should we be on and all that stuff, but I will say that we just gotta be better. We just gotta be better as a country. People are dying, right? Our tens of millions of Americans are unemployed right now and seeking unemployment benefits. We are in a national crisis, the likes of which we have never seen before. And we've just got to stop throwing punches. We need to solve this problem. And I really, really worry about all the people who are like rightfully or wrongfully blaming one another. It doesn't really matter. We just kind of have to get over ourselves and, look at the data, swallow our pride, and try to do what's best for the American people right now. That's my personal opinion. I don't want to get into all the is Trump right? Is Fauci right? Is the CDC right? I don't want to go into all that, but I do want to say we really have to set aside our differences.
So, okay. Fascinating stuff. I know. So I'm sure everyone heard a lot of different things. But the thing I found most interesting when we're hearing those three little vignettes there, the three little interviews, is that it's amazing when we're talking about this on the news. It's just people yelling at police officers or nurses or doctors. It's people who are calling the protester idiots or COVID idiots. There's nothing in there is an understanding of, hey, why is it that you believe that? Why do you feel so strongly about it? Because that's why we're so passionate. And so I think one thing that I heard, and this is me putting my therapist hat on, I think the gentleman that was a little bit more not necessarily against social distancing, but was a little bit more kind of skeptical when he was sitting there going into like, listen, I believed in it at first, but then it was more the time length. And he brought up the confusion, differing things that were put out as they learned it, and even the effect it had. He was talking about masks. At first they said we didn't need masks. Now they say that we do. And then the way it was interpreted was basically like, it was almost like I didn't believe what they were telling me after that. They've lost credibility. And it was just interesting when it was just like about, this is why I believe that there wasn't any anger. There wasn't any idiocracy. It was actually very open and honest answers, very clearly well thought out. And you listen to that and it's like, okay, I see where they're coming from. They're not a moron. They actually have a reasoning for their thoughts, but you don't hear that on the news at all. Then you heard the folks that were that were more for it, and I think what you heard with their answers, where this is what I believe, but then they went very quickly into, this is what I base that on. This is the data. This is the science. This is where I get this information. A couple of them looked like they were in healthcare. And so they took their understandings of the human body. And I think that's something that, and Dan, our good friend of the show, has said multiple times, is that we don't do a good job as researchers and scientists and experts to talk to people who aren't. And as a result of that, we wonder why they don't listen to us, and we don't listen to them. And I think that's very clear of people who come from a medical background. They understand these things. Because that's their line of study. I mean, that they understand the body like they should, because if they're going to be in these fields. And so all of everything, even when it's on the fence, or maybe when it's something that was a little confusing, they can fill in the gaps with their knowledge, their expertise, and it makes sense. But I think sometimes we forget a lot of people don't have that. What comes easy to us because we do it every single day doesn't come as easy to everybody else. And so that was another thing I really picked up on and noticed. The one thing I think was interesting, though, and this is where I think, where we're going to have a fun conversation with it, is that when you look at the differences between what people think about, I think from our one guest, not given it's a small sample size, but from our one guest, when they were talking about, I'm thinking about the economy, I'm thinking enough is enough. This is, this is my rights. I can do kind of, I can do kind of what I can do, don't infringe upon it. Don't tell me what to do. I do me, you do you. Whereas I think the people that were a little bit more for the social distancing, a lot of the rationale wasn't about themselves and their freedoms. It was more about they didn't want to affect other people. Or they want to help other people because maybe that's their line of work. And by having social distancing, they can see with their hands every single day the advantages of it. And so something came out of this where it's like, mysteriously, when people listen to each other, you get an understanding of why they believe that. But that is not what is happening on a national basis. People aren't even talking about why they believe it. It simply just gets thrown into value judgments and name calling. And I don't know about you, the second that happens, anyone in those situations is going to stop listening. And so it's when we start understanding or wondering why our country is the way that it is, why are we so polarized, you very quickly see that our goal, it's funny because we're so passionate about this country. It's why we're upset about it. That's why we fight for what we do. That's why I make the sacrifices of doing podcasting. That's why people will make the sacrifices of going out and protesting in a downtown area with a bunch of other people during a pandemic. People love this country. They feel passionate about what this country stands for. We all want to protect it. But the problem is, though, is that passion, it can sometimes get in the way, because like I see with my clients all the time, is that when a lot of times we're acting only from emotion, where the purpose of a behavior only serves a purpose, making the emotion better. Like think of like throwing your cell phone and breaking it. It might have made you feel better in that moment, but the bigger picture, now you got to spend $400 on a new phone, and now you're without one for a couple days. And that's what I really think, is that because we're so angry, because I think the media and the politicians have used that against us to divide us, it's almost preventing us from talking, where we actually sat down and talked. It's amazing what would happen. So why is this happening? Is this like some conspiracy theory where it's some deep state thing to get us to hate each other? I mean, maybe, I don't know. I mean, there could be an element of truth to that, but I think what's happening is good old fashioned flaws of being a human being. And so I thought it was important to talk about that today, because if we're going to like solve things, we need to understand our own faults and flaws. And I know that isn't very popular right now. No one likes to admit a fault or a flaw. But the truth of the matter is that is half the reason why we're kind of fucked the way that we are, is that our thinking, how we view the world, not even understanding our own errors of judgment is what gets in the way. So why is all this happening? And let's relate it back to what is happening right now with the protest. How can we have this singular thing that we're all involved with? We're all watching it, seeing it together. But one half of the country, it seems like, is all about, we got to shut down. The other half is like, no, like it's gone on long enough. We're destroying the economy. Cure can't be worse than the disease. How can we be that different? Well, there's a couple of different psychological constructs that kind of play into it. You see, the human brain, we have these things called defenses. These defenses, they're there to protect us, which is kind of dope. It's the reason why every single one of us is alive right now. Problem is, though, these defenses are subconscious, meaning that they're below our cognizant conscious mind. It's like that for a reason. If our brain doesn't trust us to make the right decision. So if it feels as though there's a threat out there and it doesn't trust us to do the defense to protect you, well, it doesn't like those chances. So it'd rather just make it to where you don't even know you're doing it, so you can ensure that it gets done. I mean, that's great and all if it's a defense that we need to be thinking about. Think of like an involuntary reflex. You catch a hot pan, your arm automatically retracts back. You don't think about it, so it protects you. But what happens if it's not protecting us? Because the subconscious it's kind of like living in a silo. It doesn't get all the right information. So all it gets is like the alarm that something is wrong, but it doesn't see that maybe it's a test or maybe that you're seeing it wrong. All it knows that alarm goes off, I'm going to make you do it. And so we have to understand that the way our brain works, we don't realize we're doing a lot of these things. One of those constructs that explains why we're having this disconnect with the social distancing and the shutdown is what we call cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is simply the psychological term for the angst and anxiety that is created when there's a difference between what we believe in here and up here versus what we're seeing in the outside world. The brain doesn't like cognitive dissonance because it means then there's a profound shift that needs to happen. A very simple way of illustrating is like when somebody dies suddenly, when someone is in denial. That is the brain's ability to reduce the dissonance that's being created between the person was alive, now they're not alive anymore. So by denying it for that little time frame, you're almost like not allowing yourself to feel the full weight of what you just heard. It makes sense that way, but we're seeing it playing out right now. I mean, think of how scary this thing can be for so many people, whether it be you're a healthcare worker, a doctor, a nurse, a respiratory therapist, you're a first line defender, you're a grocery worker. I've been hearing that with my clients, like just people having panic attacks before going into work, a grocery worker. And it's scary, which means that our brain's defenses are even more alert because unlike in the past, like where we kind of almost seek up every emotion and seek up every anxiety that isn't real, but it's just because our brain just thinks it needs to look for a threat. And a lot of times we come up with threats that aren't even there. Our brain will, our brain isn't doing that this time. This is a real threat, which means it's reinforced and magnified. And so on top of that, we don't like the feeling of being out of control of major things that can affect our survival. We've always had the luxury of our generations of we've had some things happen like 9/11 and some natural disasters, but nothing to where it's long-term and anything that legitimately threatened the very livelihood of our society that we've come accustomed to being in our entire lives. That if I can't think of many things that would create more cognitive dissonance than that. And so what do people do with that dissonance? Well, one, we know the avoidance route. The avoidance route, it's kind of like, it's not happening. It's not happening. So dissonance goes down. And what happens, our brain will literally, to avoid better, our brain will literally, even like literally, it's amazing. It will control what we pay attention to and what we don't pay attention to, what we'll internalize and memorize, what we won't. And so literally what we call, a lot of times we'll fall for the confirmation bias where we're only going to be looking at information or information will only register. Think of it like, the alarm won't go off or it won't like save to the hard drive unless it's only going to do it for information that confirms what they want to believe. And so if you don't want to believe that this virus is that bad, if you don't want to believe, like literally your brain is only going to look and seek out and even acknowledge information that validates that belief, ergo less dissonance, and you go on believing what it is that you believe. Just like you have some people will what they call accommodate and assimilate the new information. Accommodate means, okay, so okay, so now this can go a couple different ways. Accommodate can go in the way of, okay, so I didn't think that there could ever be a virus like this. So obviously the environment's telling me there can be one. So, well, one way you can go for it is, okay, maybe I was wrong. Well, shit, that creates a lot of cognitive dissonance, but okay, all right. Which then leads into assimilation, meaning how do I now take this new information and rewrite every existing construct I had in my head to account for, okay, there is a deadly virus and this can happen. I need to start changing what I'm doing differently. And that creates a shit ton of anxiety. But if you have good people there and support, you talk about it, you're able to cope with it, our brain will adapt to that new one, to that new angst, that new programming, that new reality. Sometimes, though, to accommodate it, we'll be like, we'll change our existing thought structures to where the information that I am seeing is false. It's not real. It's fake news. Oh, no. It's a deep state thing. So it's not really happening because they just want you to make it think it happens. Once again, same exact thing. Well, okay, it reduces the dissonance. And that's, a lot of what's kind of going on right now on both sides. And this episode isn't about going, the protesters are right, the Liberate people are right. No, the doctors and mask it up, stay the fuck home crowd is right. No, it's not about that. What it's about is that we have to understand why we're seeing what it is that we are. We have to understand why half of this country is viewing something one way, the other half is viewing it a different way. Nobody's wanting to ask, well, why do you believe that? All we want to do is point the finger, go, why are you wrong? And not only that, we're going to put a value judgment on, you're trying to kill people. You're trying to destroy the economy. You're a communist. You're a dark. I mean, it's like, Jesus, like nothing. If we're that passionate enough to have a TV show to go in March, that means then our number one goal, we care so much. We want to preserve this country. We want to preserve it. We want to preserve it for our family members. We want to preserve it for the next generation. Our goal is to work together to beat this thing, to work together to rebuild our economy, to work together to look at the things that are broken in our economy, the things that were exposed by COVID-19 and the shutdown, and fix it together. Be Americans together, because that's exactly what we need right now, to be Americans and working together. Because if we don't, it is true, united we stand, divided we fall. And as a clinician, it might sound hokey when I say this, the path to understanding is listening. You may not agree with a person that is standing across from you. And that's in grad school, everything we learn. We're not going to agree with everything with the people that are across from us. We may not even understand some of those things. But that relationship you have with that client, if you ask the right questions, you show them that you care to understand, you get an understanding of their worldview, now you can understand your client. And if they feel understood and heard, they're going to hear and listen to you a little bit more, which my whole goal isn't to talk at a client. My goal is to help a client. And if to help a client, they need to feel like I'm hearing and listening to them. Even, one of the things and this is something that, when we're looking at the show is about putting things into action. And so this is an action step. I want every one of the listeners that are listening to this to try out. It's a little analogy that was given to me when I was an intern. And it's something that I've carried with me and something I tell clients all the time. It's 98% of the time, a listener hears what a speaker is saying, but only 60% of the time, a listener or a speaker feels heard by the listener. And he went to me and he goes, what does that mean your job as a listener is? My job as a listener is to make the speaker feel heard. It doesn't matter if I hear them. If this person that I'm talking to doesn't feel like I am, my job is to try to show them that I'm listening to them. My job is to try to show them I'm trying to hear them out. And when that happens, that's when there's movement. That's where there's progress. That's where there then is a communication style and a pattern where we're willing to come back and talk again. And we have to come back and talk again. If you're a protester in a Liberate movement, if you're a doctor or a nurse that is 100% about keeping things locked down, we're not going to bridge that gap by yelling at each other and pointing the finger and saying each one of us is the reason that America is going to be destroyed. We get it by going, hey, what is it that you believe? Why is it that you believe that? Where do you get that information? What do you base that on? If we can start with those conversations, well, then you'll have another conversation and another conversation. So then all of a sudden, the point of an interaction with somebody that thinks differently than you isn't about, I want to try to change their mind. No. Your goal is to get each other to listen to each other. And the goal is to have a quality conversation where you are willing to have another conversation. And each one feels heard. Each one feels like they understand why the other person believes what they do. And they believe the other person feels the same way about what they feel. We have that. That's where the seed of understanding. Compromise is a dirty word, some reason in politics. I'm not even going to use that. It's just an understanding and being a human being for each other. Realizing that we accomplish more together than we do separate. And of all times we need it the most, the time is now. That's what this is about. Understanding our psychology, understanding the human factor behind politics, behind sociology, behind public policy, behind our disagreements. The media isn't about understanding. The media isn't about getting us to compromise. They're about ratings. Ratings are about negative emotion to keep you glued, to keep you fervent, to keep you engaged, to keep you sending and sharing stuff because you feel so strongly about it. They're not doing us any good. They are in a way, they are the enemy. The prescription for the news was wrong. We always thought it was about, here's this window to the world and you can trust that I'm a source. No, we have to do things differently. We have to stop with this whole game of, here's my conclusion, here's the evidence. How about we just let the fucking story and the evidence tell us what the headline is? And this is a headline that has yet to be written about what is going to happen with the economy opening up. And we need to stop writing the story like we know what's going to happen. How about the story is, hey, let's hear what someone has to say. So I challenge all of you to do that. That's what this is about. This is our call to action. And we don't have a choice, because if we want this world to be a better place, we want it to be there for our kids, we want it to be catastrophic. This is an arranged marriage, folks. And if in a marriage where we choose the people that we are married to and work with, and we still have to compromise and learn how to communicate and learn how to be okay not being okay, we sure should have to do it in an arranged marriage where we didn't pick who our partners are. But this is all of our home. This is all of our house together. And we have to protect this house together. And it's the only option we got. So that's America's counselors. That's my advice. That's what we need to be doing. And fuck it, I'm going to stick to it. So, but that's how we're going to do this show. And maybe it's a little bit more streamlined. Maybe it's a little bit less banner, but it's to the fact. It's all about the human factors, folks. And we do need a new prescription for our news. And I hope maybe this is part of that new treatment. And I hope it works. But if not, I'm going to keep trying for you guys, because I owe it to you guys if I'm going to be doing this. So, let's talk. So, talk with each other, listen, make the speaker feel heard. And that is your only goal. Challenge one person on your Facebook group, one person in your neighborhood, one person at work. Challenge it. Talk. Listen. And that is it. Don't even offer up a rebuttal. Don't offer up an interpretation. Just simply reflect back what you hear. Make sure you heard them right. And leave it at that. Walk away. And I promise you, we all do that. We're going places. So that's what I got for you. Hope it works. I don't know if it's going to or not, but sure as shit we're going to find out, right? So everybody, on that note, all right, I'm Michael Devine. I'm America's counselor. I am trying to counsel every one and last one of you guys, even if you yell at me and tell me to get the fuck away. But I don't know. I hear you. I know you're frustrated. I'm frustrated. And it's time that we all be frustrated together and figure this shit out together, okay? So on that note, remember, next time someone asks you, you a Democrat, you a Republican, you red, you blue, you're whatever. Just say, fuck that noise. My ass is gray. All right, everyone, you be good to each other. I will see you guys right here where I always am, in my basement, until, I'm not in my basement. But this is where I'll be. And you guys all be good to each other. See you guys next week. Peace.